is it Dr. Professor Laura Templeman, and she'll be joining us, and she'll be talking with us about atheism and nuns and different things on that realm of spirituality or lack of spirituality, maybe. So anyway, please welcome Laura. And this will be the last one of this series, and we'll possibly start again in October this year. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm Professor Laura Templeman. Oh, thank you. I work at NIC, and that is how Jennifer got in contact with me. But I'm not speaking as like a representative of NIC. I'm just talking because I have knowledge in this area. And I'm doing it so that if you have any questions that you need to ask, that I would be able to answer them. And I know I have a Q&A at the end, but throughout the presentation, if you have any questions for me, just stop and I'm happy to answer during the time period. I want this to be as helpful to you as it can be, as well as informative. So I really want to answer any and all questions that you may have. Okay, so my contact information is here, and I'll post it again at the end of the presentation. I'll be talking about atheism and a whole bunch of other concepts that are similar. So I teach philosophy at NIC. I've been there for 25 years, quite a long time. I do teach world religions, and I teach intro to philosophy, which is the big meaning of life questions. That's the class that if you're a philosophy professor, everyone thinks that you're teaching. But we also teach logic and reasoning, so symbolic logic and informal reasoning and logic. And then I also teach intro to ethics, and I just started this new ethics in healthcare class. It's going to run in the fall. It's the first time I'm teaching it. And I wasn't sure if it was even going to go. It's an online class, and we do have a lot of healthcare majors and different majors, and so they just added a second section, so that's really good. Things are going well with that class, I think. And then I teach business ethics as well. So a lot of different kinds of classes, and then some other kind of classes too, but mostly just philosophy classes that we teach. So what I'm going to do today is kind of go over some statistics and kind of a public view of what atheism and the surrounding topics are. I'll define some terms and kind of give you some specifics about people who are called nuns, N-O-N-E-S, not N-U-N-S, who are atheists. I'll talk about some life services and some respectful kind of end-of-life conversation pieces and maybe some things to do, and then I'll conclude and have some questions. I have links throughout, and I'll send this to Jennifer. So if you're interested in any of the links that I talk about or have used, you'll be able to link directly to them from the presentation. All right, so I'm going to start out with I always find the most updated statistics I can find. So this is 2023 and 2024 world population religions. And so you'll see Christianity is about 31% of the world population, and Islam is about 25%. The next largest group are the nuns, or those who are unaffiliated with a particular religion. And it's an umbrella term that includes a lot of different types of ideas, but that's about 16%, or 1.2 billion people out of about 8 billion people. Yeah, we're over 8 billion people as of 2022. And so let's look at this pie chart, which is sometimes easier to visualize. You see Christianity and Islam make up more than half of the world population, and nuns are the next largest group or piece of that pie chart. And so 1.2 billion people, about 16% of the world population. Are you interested in hearing like a short synopsis of the religions? Okay, so Christianity, I'm sure you're all familiar with. It actually started with the very smallest pie sliver. You can see Judaism up there. It's so small, I can't even hover over it, doesn't even make a line. It's 15 million people out of over 8 billion people in the world. So it's way less than 1% of the world population. But Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are considered the Western religions. And that story of Judaism is what is basically Christians call the Old Testament. And that's the starting story of all three of these religions. So they all believe in the same exact God. the God of Abraham. That's the God that is discussed and really talked about in the Tanakh, which is the Jewish Bible, basically. And that's the Old Testament part of the Christian Bible. The New Testament talks more about Jesus. And then Islam accepts both of those books, but then the Quran is supposedly the corrective version. These books were written by people inspired by God and events in history, but Islam is directly from God. And so those three religions all believe in the same exact God. Allah is just another word for the God. That's what it translates as. So they all believe in the same God of Abraham. So more than half of the world population is in some way involved with the God of Abraham. Then this next section, people who are unaffiliated, that includes atheists, agnostics, people who think that there's not a specific religion, but there might be spirituality in general. Hinduism and Buddhism are the next two groups. Hinduism is about 1.2 billion people as well, just about 15% of the world population. And Hinduism and Buddhism are Eastern religions, and most people just kind of glomp them together as these are the religions that started in India, but they're very different actually. Hinduism believes that everything in the world is part of divinity itself. You are part of divinity. There's really only one thing, and that is God. And there's in the Hindu belief system, there is millions of gods, one for every aspect that we can possibly think of. But in fact, they're all part of just one entity. And so the entire point of Hinduism is to seek your underlying self that is part of the divine essence of everything. So looking for that, the self that exists from lifetime to lifetime, that's the true you. And in Buddhism, the exact opposite. The Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, was a Hindu important person. He was part of the ruling class, and he went out looking basically for this self that underlies all of the different iterations of who we are, and he couldn't find it. And so he started a new thought process. So Hinduism is about finding your underlying self. Buddhism is about realizing that there is no underlying self. All there is change. So every moment you are a different person. From the beginning of this sentence to the end of this sentence, I've, inhaled and exhaled, so I'm actually a different person. And so we do exist, but according to Buddhism, there's no underlying self that exists from moment to moment. There's just this compilation of parts and pieces that we are that's kind of ever changing. And so to realize that the world is change and that we don't actually like change very much, that causes us to suffer, that's the Buddhist set of ideas. So very different, even though they're usually lumped together. Indigenous religions make up just under 6% of the world population, and those are tribal all over the world. Groups that are indigenous or from that particular area. It's more of a lifestyle of a particular group of people that live in that particular area. And then that last 1% or so is a bunch of other different religions, and then Judaism. So before I go on, do you have any questions? I do teach world religions, so I can probably answer your questions if you have any.
How has this changed in recent years? Is it pretty stagnant, these numbers?
No, Christianity and Islam have changed. Christianity has gone down in percentage and Islam has gone up. This group has stayed about the same. It's grown a little bit recently. And the reason Islam is growing so much is because people who are Islamic are usually from areas that have a very high population. And a lot of the areas of Christianity are not growing so much in population. So there is some conversion, but it's largely due to the areas where, like in Northern Africa and then in the Far East, those are the places that have very high population growth. And so the number of people who are Islamic, because you're usually the religion that you're brought up with. And so there's more people who are being born into Islamic families than to Christian families. But this group has grown, and I'll talk about some statistics in a couple of slides about that. Okay, if you have other questions, feel free to ask me as we go on. So in the United States, the nones population, or people who don't affiliate with any particular religion, is almost 1 in 3 people. It's almost 30%. And Idaho is surprisingly a little bit higher than the national average. So about 33% of people who live in Idaho say they're unaffiliated with any particular religion. And then I have statistics for all of these down here on these charts, but 62% of adults in our country identify as Christian as of these 2024 statistics. So I think that things are changing a little bit, and I don't know if you're seeing this reflect in the people who come through, but you probably are experiencing more people who are not affiliated with a particular religion than in previous years. So the group called the Nones is on the rise, and a lot of these statistics are from the Pew Forum, which is a very reliable website for statistics. So about 20% of adults in a lot of countries in Asia, Europe, and the Americas have made the change from religion to unaffiliated. And a lot of those are moves in our country from Christianity into the unaffiliated. So if you look at this chart, in the United States, about 28% of the population have changed religions, and the vast majority of them, that's what the second line is, have switched from Christianity to the Nones group, or the unaffiliated group. And again, I have statistics for that as well. Let's talk about some just overview of the religious landscape in our country. About 86% of people believe that we have this thing called a soul, which is this nebulous, really unidentifiable aspect of us that's immaterial. And a lot of people think different things about what the soul is. But there are 86% of the population. That means some of the nones, people who don't affiliate with the religion, still believe in the idea of a soul. In terms of the kind of the breakout of times, young adults are far less religious than older adults. And I'm going to look at this chart just to show you that. This is 1986, 96, 2006, 2016, and 2020. The purple is 18 to 29-year-olds. And those groups are always the unaffiliated. Those numbers are always higher than the other groups. This is the group of 30 to 49, 50 to 64, and 65 plus. So the older you get, the more religious you are, according to these statistics. And so the younger groups are the ones who are the most unaffiliated. And as we move forward in time, those will be the people who are making up more of the population. Okay, going back to this. About 35% of US adults have switched religions since childhood. And it's mostly from Christianity into unaffiliated, or the Nones group. In general, women are more religious than men in our country. And I'm talking politics, but we're not getting into like what's right or what's wrong or anything. But as far as politics go, since 2007, so in the last 20 or so years, the number of people who are liberal that are Christian has decreased 25%, from 62 to 37%. That's a pretty big decrease in 2 decades. And then the number of people who consider themselves conservatives that are Christian have declined 7%, so down to 82%. So there's a shift in demographics, and part of the reason that I like doing this is because I want people to be aware of these things, and you're going to come in contact with more and more people who are identifying as not religious for various reasons. Okay, so oftentimes people who are atheists feel that they are discriminated against because they're not looked at in a very good light. In fact, this is like a warmth meter, and people who are looked at with the most warmth are at the top. And these bottom 3, Mormons, atheists, and Muslims, are always at the bottom. They switch places in various years. So only 20% of Americans have favorable ideas or opinions of people who are considered atheists, and 24% hold unfavorable opinions. So people who are atheists oftentimes don't want to come out and proclaim themselves as atheists because there is this perceived negativity about it. I put over here, knowing somebody from a particular group and really getting to know them as a person changes your attitudes about people who are of whatever different persuasion. So once you know people who are of this different persuasion, you realize they're really not terrible people. They are just different than you, and you might not have thought of their particular ideas before. So you're more likely to have positive feelings when you interact with people of different perspectives. So the societal view of atheism, first of all, atheism is not a religion. I know we're talking about religion here, but atheism is not a religion. It's just not believing in a God. That's all. That's the only thing that really unites people that are atheists. And it is the third largest group in the world, or the umbrella that includes atheism is the third largest group in the world. But impression management is something that's very important to people. So a lot of times people won't come out and say whether they're atheists or not. They kind of hide it. So there might be more nones than people admit, but people don't like to claim the atheist position. So this is a little bit older, this one right here, University of Minnesota. I think this was like 10 years ago. But atheists remain the most disliked religious minority in the country. Okay, so this last one is, it's a combination of political ideology and age groups. And so if you look, this is the younger population, and they have kind of, this is around 35 to 40% up atop. It doesn't matter whether you're conservative or liberal, you have about the same view of atheists. But as you ask older people, this is 75 years old, you'll notice that there's a wide gap between those who are conservatives and how they look negatively at atheists. And at the top, it stays about the same for people who are liberal, no matter what age you are. So this is the way that people look at atheists, whether they feel warmly towards them or not. The older conservatives get, the less warm they feel towards atheists. And I bring these up not to be controversial, but because they're realities in what you deal with.
You can see that being affecting the family dynamics as we're looking at family.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go on to a different section and kind of make some definitions, but does anyone have questions so far? No? Okay, so let's cover some different definitions, because people usually lump atheism in with a whole bunch of other things. So theism, here on the left-hand side, theism is just the belief in God or gods. And so monotheism is the belief in one God, which is what the Western religions are, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Polytheism is belief in many gods. And so that would be like the ancient Greeks with Zeus and all of their gods and goddesses. Pantheism, pan means all. And so pantheism means everything is God in totality. So the universe itself is God. We are all parts and pieces of God. So that would be an example of Hinduism. And many indigenous tribes also believe in that there is just one entity or one circle of life that includes everything, and everyone and everything in it is part of God itself, or a divine essence. Non-theism is a term that means, while there isn't a God or gods in charge, but there is possibly a spiritual realm. So it's not a belief in theism, but it's a belief that there might be something beyond the physical realm. And a lot of people who are in the nones are in that category. Atheism, A is the opposite of. So a person who is a theist believes in God. A person who is an atheist doesn't believe in God. And then deism is a term I threw in there because it's sometimes used. Many of our founding fathers were deists. They believed that God created the universe and the world and set it up, but then stepped back and doesn't have any interference in it. And so all the human decisions that we make are what make the world the way it is. And so God doesn't interfere anymore. So God exists, created everything, and then stepped back, and humans are in charge. So those are definitions about theism itself, about the belief or not believing in God. Gnostic means to have like a direct spiritual encounter, or a kind of knowing of God directly. And so a person who is an agnostic, A is again the opposite of, it's a person who has not had a direct religious experience or encounter. And so agnostics are people that say, I don't know if there's a God or not. I'm not making a decision because I don't have an answer to that. And usually atheists and agnostics are often interchanged confusingly. Atheists do not believe in God. Agnostics say, I don't know. And agnostics are not agnostics who are terrible spellers. They're people who believe that we don't really define God or divinity well enough yet to even make a decision. We need to have a prior conversation about what we're talking about before we can make a decision on that. And then these words are not under Gnosticism, but they fit well in the PowerPoint here. Secular humanists are often what people who are agnostic or atheist are referred to as. Secular means non-religious, and humanist is a person who, regardless of belief in God, really focus on human achievements and the things that we can do as a human population. So secular humanists are sometimes another name for atheist or agnostics. Hello. Monistic is a term that just means there's one totality of everything. And so similar to pantheism, there's just one essence, and all of the different aspects of it are, for various reasons, seen differently, like the physical and the non-physical, but really they're just part of one totality. And so some of these words are a little bit interchangeable. We've talked about the soul. There isn't really a good or one definition of what a soul is. Most people believe in a soul, some ephemeral part of us that may or may not live on afterwards, but it's the immaterial aspect of it. And then nuns are this umbrella group that covers all people who don't affiliate with a religion. So that's atheists, agnostics, non-theists, and people who say, I just don't even care. I don't even want to answer this question. That's a whole umbrella of what's under the nuns. There's a group called the Brights also, and if you want the link to that, that's in there. Okay, so why are atheists atheists? How did they come to this choice? And what's kind of a mindset of what it's like to be an atheist? Let's talk about some ideas. So most atheists know a lot about religion. They come to their decision to reject God after they've examined a lot of different religions. So it's often what leads them to reject religion. When we look at, there's a quiz right there on the Pew Forum about, it's a 15 questions about general religions. And if you look over here, atheists and the Jewish population score very high in knowledge of world religions and religion in public life. And this idea of knowing about information about the Bible and Christianity specifically. So atheists know a lot about other religions. It's not like they've just, spuriously just decided to give up on life. They actually have examined things, usually, not always, but they've examined things and decided that they don't particularly believe in God because of their examination. So as I've talked about, atheists are just people who don't believe in God. That's really the only thing that unites them together. It's not some monolithic group that has meetings every Sunday or something. They don't really, there's no affiliation except for groups like the Brights, except that they are together in their non-believing in God, the not believing. So some of the ideas, and I have to kind of just bring them together as, I have to give the disclaimer that there's not some group that's verifying that these are ideas of atheists, but this is kind of the general mindset of many atheists. There's an idea that if you're an atheist, this is all you get. There is no afterlife. This is the totality of your experience. And since we only have, 80, 100 years, if we're lucky, that it's very precious. It's not like something that you can take for granted because there isn't an afterlife. And so this is all you get. And so it makes atheists oftentimes very grateful and in awe of the world itself. And one of the, there's a link to this, it's a very long chart. The mathematics of you being who you are almost zero. If you look back to all of the previous things in your family tree, like your parents meeting, your grandparents meeting, and going back and back and back for all of time, the chances of you and your genetic combination are astronomically small. So you're so unique and you're so lucky to be here that an atheist would feel that they won the lottery, basically. And so it's awesome to be able to have this experience, even on the worst days. So there's facts about the mathematics behind this big chart. So gratitude for the chance to experience life is something that atheists oftentimes say that they have. We're going to die, and this is Richard Dawkins, a very famous atheist. Most people are never going to die because they're never going to be born. The potential people who could have been here in my place outnumber the grains of sand in Arabia. In the teeth of these stupefying odds that we exist, it is you and I in our ordinariness that are here. And so that's like a kind of amazing thought. Even if you're not an atheist, it's a pretty cool thought. I'll tell you, there's not a lot of jokes about death and atheism. So my parents died, their parents died, their parents died, runs in the family. That's really, the only one you're getting. So hope you enjoy it. So how do atheists deal with the anxieties of death? So most of the time, religion provides ideas for how to cope with the idea of death and as you come to end of life, either you or a family member. But atheists don't believe in that, so they have to have other methods of coping. So they don't believe in the immortality of the soul. Even the majority of them don't. There are some people who are in that nones category that do believe in a soul. So they just believe in a spiritual realm, and they may believe that something goes beyond. But for the most part, atheists don't believe that there is a soul, and therefore there is no immortality. So this is the end of existence. So how do they deal with the end? They believe that there is biological immortality, and that, if you have children, genetic children, that you pass on your genes. There's social immortality in that you affect the loved ones and friends and family that you have, and so you live on in that way. There's moral immortality, meaning if you make a contribution to society or the world is better for you being here, then you've made a lasting impression, and all the ripple effects from that, butterfly effects. And then there's life cycle immortality. As my chemistry teacher in high school said, I think we're like $5 of chemicals in totality. And this was a while ago. And if I adjust for inflation, I don't know, maybe we're like $200 of chemicals. I don't really know. Didn't look that part up. But anyway, all the parts and pieces of us, when we decompose, then go out into the rest of the universe and live on in that way. And, we're all supposedly from the belly of stars and the larger chemical explosions there. So these are part of the ways that people deal with the end of life. They have respect and awe for the idea of life itself, and that we get to have this experience. And then, hopefully that we've been part of a larger experience that will live on even after we die. We've made changes and ripple effects. I'm going to talk about Hemant Mehta, who wrote a book called I Sold My Soul on eBay, and some comments that he's made. He has a lot of interaction between religious and non-religious people, and he doesn't actually believe in a soul, so it's a funny name for his book. But actually, when he was in college, he put his time for sale on eBay and said to the highest purchaser, you can tell me to go to whatever church you choose, you can buy my time. He needed money. So he sold his time on eBay. And Henderson is the person who bought many hours of his time and told him to go to a lot of different churches and then write about the experience. That was his condition of giving him the money. So this book is kind of an overview of his experiences. He went to mega churches, small churches, all different kinds of groups and perspectives from different religious areas. And that book is actually, it's kind of old now. It's probably like 15 or 20 years old. But he talks a lot between religion and non-religion. And as an atheist, he calls himself a friendly atheist because he's trying to have ongoing positive dialogue between all these different groups. So these are some of the main points that he touches in his book, and in the link to that 11-minute video is in there. Some of his main topic choices. So a lot of people ask Mehta where he gets his morality from. And this is implying, first of all, that you only get your morality from religion, which is not true, and he finds that very condescending. Many people who don't believe in a religion can still have morality. And so the humanist reason for being alive, that you want to be a contributor to society, that you have to look at yourself in the mirror when you wake up, that you live in a world that you hope to make better as part of society. So since we all live here, and especially if this is the only opportunity we get, we'd like to contribute and make the world a better place, he says. So what motivates you to get up in the morning? If you tell someone that you're an atheist, oftentimes they think or imply that you have no purpose, you don't believe in anything, and that you are sad and empty. And so this is a typical view of atheists. They're immoral, they don't have any set of beliefs, and what's the purpose even of getting up? And we do all need a purpose in life. But atheists get up, he says, for the same reasons that everybody else gets up, to experience the world. And the appreciation of this one experience as the one that we get is sometimes makes you maybe more appreciative, he says, than people who are theists. So I have 2 more slides from Mehta's comments. So atheism is not a religion. It's just the rejection of the belief in God. And he says, nobody asks you to prove that unicorns don't exist. They don't tell you that you have to talk about things that are clearly not in existence. And in his mind, God falls in that category. So no one requests you to describe disbelief of things that are not believable in his mind. So this particular thing right here is called Pascal's wager. I don't know if you're familiar with Blaise Pascal or not, but there's like 40 different arguments for the existence of God, logic arguments, and this is one of them. So in reality, there either is a God or there's not a God. Those are the only 2 possibilities. And in this chart, Pascal says you can wager that God exists, and if you're right, then you have an infinite reward. This is the best box to be in. Right? If you both believe God exists and God does exist, then all the positive things happen. If you wager that God exists and there is no God, when you die, that's it. You don't have any time to think about this, and you're just gone. You weren't right, but you don't know about it, right? This box right here, if you wager that there's no God and there is no God, okay, so you got it right, and again, done. There's nothing to win in this box either. But if you wager that there's no God and God does exist, this is the most negative box. You may not have a chance in heaven or whatever you believe are the good things that happen in the afterlife. So he says this box is so negative that it's worth it to just believe, this is his wager, that you should be in this box regardless. So whether or not God exists, wagering that he exists is probably the best box to be in. There's a couple of problems with this. Firstly, you can't just turn on beliefs like a tap. You either believe or you don't believe. It's not like I should believe, so therefore I do. That's not usually how people work. So that doesn't really work for this. But also, in this understanding, you have to believe that if you substitute in the word unicorns, that this is actually a valid thing to actually put credit into. So if you really think that there is possibly a God, then this might be a good box for you. But if you believe there's just no credibility for God or no proof for God, why would you waste your time believing in something that may not have this underlying foundation? And there's a description in one of the arguments against this is that imagine if there was a dragon that lived next door to you, and if you didn't put out a bowl of marshmallows in front of his door every day, he would come over and burn you to death. Right? And so the idea is you really don't believe that there's a dragon next door. And that so people who are atheists don't really believe that a God exists. And so this is not something that is makes them change their mind, basically. This question, how can you be sure you're right? People ask Mehta all the time. Well, nobody's sure, right? He says, how can you be sure? How are you sure that there is a God? And there's some more argumentation besides Pascal's wager. There's Russell's teapot, and this is a very famous philosophical argument. And Bertrand Russell says, imagine out in the solar system, there is a very small teapot and it's in orbit around the sun. No matter what kind of telescope you have, due to the vastness of space, you'll never see this teapot. But believe me, I'm telling you that this teapot exists, says Russell. And you would probably say, well, why should I? This seems ridiculous. Please provide some proof that this teapot exists. And Russell says, well, if you have this extraordinary claim, you must also have extraordinary support for this claim. And of course, he is saying that this is what religion should do. Religion has this claim that this immaterial, non-provable existence is here, and we should, the supporters of this should be the one that provide proof, not the people who disbelieve in it. So the onus is on people who believe in religion to support it, rather than on the atheist to prove that God doesn't exist. So that's oftentimes a burden that Mehta says he feels. So how can you be sure you're right? Well, he says he's not. And if he were provided with proof that God existed, he says he would change his mind. So he just asks you to really wonder, if you're religious, why do you believe what you believe? And could you possibly be wrong? Since he's asked to wonder about whether he's wrong all the time. Okay, and then the last one from the friendly atheist, Hemant Mehta, he encounters this perspective a lot. You're not really an atheist, you're really just agnostic, you don't really know whether there's a God or not, or you're spiritual. And he says he finds this to be very insulting. He has a decision. He's made a decision about not believing in God. And he says, really, what you're doing when you say these things about me is making it easier for you to accept me. So he says, can you please just consider that I might actually believe what I believe, even if that makes you uncomfortable. And I think that's maybe, I don't know how many of you have been dealing with people who are atheist or not. I don't know if they're a very large North Idaho group of people that are atheists, but this is probably something that they feel. They always have to support themselves or portray themselves or stay in the closet about whether they're atheists. And the last question is, a lot of atheists gets asked, why are you so angry? And he says, he calls himself the friendly atheist. He says, I'm not angry, but he said, I am tired of explaining myself. It's very exhausting. I'm tired of being misunderstood. And because so many people frown upon atheism, he's tired of experiencing prejudice and being looked down on. So these are all things to consider when you encounter somebody who may be non-religious, that these are some of the things that they've experienced. It's a form of prejudice that's not talked about a lot. So before I go forward, are there other maybe things that you would want to ask me about? Encounters with atheists and their beliefs? Okay. These are some articles, and if you are interested in them, they'll be in the PowerPoint. So it's kind of a summary of the beliefs of atheists, which is basically they don't believe in God. That's it. That's the thing that unites them. They're a very diverse group. All kinds of people would be in this group. But some of the things that they believe is that, again, they're so unlikely to exist that they really feel a lot of awe and joy. And in Japanese, there's a word called yugen, which is this ineffable awe at the universe and the beauty of nature, and kind of that's the feeling that many atheists have about getting to experience this world. They oftentimes believe in science and the logic behind science and have an awe of science. Richard Dawkins one time said, I'm going to get this wrong exactly, it's not an exact quote, but some poet was saying he felt sorry for him because he could look at a flower and not see the beauty. And he said, well, I see the beauty of the flower, but I also see all the beauty of the science behind the flower. Why is it the color that it is? How did it come to be exactly as it is? And he said, I see more than you. And so he said, yeah, I can see what you as a poet see, but science gives me even more awe than you might at first consider.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, and you might have already stated this, but do atheists believe in evolution?
Well, again, it's not a monolithic group, but most of them would probably believe in evolution.
Okay.
Because a lot of atheists are science-based. But again, there's not like a place to check in as an atheist to register your vote, because there's not a group. So largely, I would say that most atheists have understanding of science and believe in evolution.
I know that Dawkins, who wrote The God Delusion, he now had read that he's leaning towards a designer, but it's not God.
Yeah.
It is a designer. There is a design in the cosmos, but it's not God. So.
Yeah, I think that's pretty controversial, and I don't know that he actually did that. But that we could have a whole separate conversation about Dawkins. He's got his own troublesome following. He's not the friendly atheist. He's the irritating, I'm annoyed atheist. So a lot of people don't want to hear about Dawkins. So that's why I went with Hemant Mehta, the friendly atheist, and his comments. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about end of life, and this is probably how you're probably the most interested in hearing about atheists. again, there's no one ritual or way of organizing the end of life for an atheist or their family members. But we do all need rituals to cope with the end of life. And so whether it's a religious ritual or just a celebration of life, which is often what atheists celebrate, it's part of the grieving process. It's part of the natural order in dealing with a difficult event and moving on to the next step. So there's all kinds of ways of dealing with the body itself through regular burial or cremation. There's also there's lots of new things that are popping up recently in the last decade. There's something called bios urn, in which they cremate the body and put the ashes into a big vase, and they put a tree seed in there and then given to the family so you can grow a tree. There is also, in about a dozen states now, there's human composting that costs about Washington allows for that. It costs about $5,000. Sorry, Idaho is not on the list of the dozen or so states that allow for this. There's all kinds of ways to donate your body, not just for anatomy classes, but there's all kinds of, I think I mentioned last time the Mary Roach book called Stiff. She goes through all of the many ways that if you donate your body, you might be used. And so for the positivity of science, or even for seatbelts, and all kinds of various things. So there's different ways to donate your body.
Getting thrown out of planes.
Yeah.
I recommend the read.
It is a really good book, yeah. Mary Roach, Stiff.
And she's funny.
Yeah.
She makes it funny.
Stiff. Yeah. And I'm sure there's ways that I don't have on here that people deal with the physical body itself that I don't know about. If you know of any, let me know and I'll add them to my list. So as a rule of thumb, if you're going to deal with a person who's dying that is an atheist, or the family member, put yourself in their shoes. And if you believe in God, imagine the idea that if you really didn't believe in God, how you would feel. And if you were in that position, how would you feel if somebody spoke to you about the afterlife or said they're in a better place? You would feel alienated because that's not your belief system. You'd feel like they don't know you. And so it's mentally exhausting to constantly have to explain the position that is not the majority position. And so just if you're dealing with a person who is not of your belief system, just try to put yourself in their shoes, which is, I'm sure, something that you all do already. But that's really the best way to try to have empathy for a person. End of life shouldn't be about the atheist having to deal with your perception of them, or dealing with religious comments that they disagree with. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir for that part, right? So some celebrations of life, what they can include, and I did a bunch of research for this, and there's not something across the board. There's not like the atheist funeral and here's the 10 things to do. But they oftentimes are a celebration of life where they honor the person with a bio. Lots of times they have a photo show that's, flipping through photos behind them as they talk. People come up in a small ceremony at the house or whatever, where they are sharing stories about how the person influenced them. So stories remembered and shared. Oftentimes there's their favorite music. So there's no one way of doing this, but they're often called celebrations of life, which is becoming more popular even in non-religious groups, the celebration of life way of dealing with it. So oftentimes atheists are called humanists. And so I found these humanist funeral customs over here. So that will be, again, there are live links in there for you if you want to look at those. But basically, they affirm the idea that the humanist made contributions to life while they were living, and hopefully those live on in some way or another. Sometimes the readings that they might get, they're found on the internet. This one is about I don't know if you've all seen this. Life is like a train ride. People get on and get off throughout your life. And, it's nice to be able to share. And so being thankful for that part of the journey. And this is Professor Brian Cox, who is an astrophysicist. he says, our story is part of the story of the universe. And it's all of the universe itself and its amazingness. And what a wonderful thing to be part of that universe. What a majestic story. You know, it's great that we get to be part of this whole story. You could share at some kind of service memories that you have. The funnier, the better, since that's a good time to share great funny stories. But if you don't know what to say, oftentimes you can Google it and you'll find words for you. I don't know about I haven't thought about this, ChatGPT. Yikes, I don't know. I'm gonna have to add that in next time for next year. But keep your condolences simple. Don't make religious references, and just, you know, say, I'm here for you. You know, I'm sorry for your loss, but no mention of the spirit living on afterwards. Celebrate their life and their contributions. So things not to say: he or she is in a better place. You're in my prayers. I'll pray for you. These are very common. Everything happens for a reason. Most of the time an atheist wouldn't believe that unless that reason is science. And their spirit will live on. They're looking down at you from heaven, or any other kind of religious kind of condolence. Those are the things to avoid saying, which makes it very difficult to say things. So, you know, just express your sincerity, your affection, your connection to that person. And I assume that you'd be trying to offer this advice to other people that you come in contact with, and to help. Oftentimes, if one person in the family is an atheist, other people are not, they have trouble dealing with how they can talk, how can they be respectful. So just trying to focus on concrete things and the memories that you share. You can help in meal preparation or on childcare. There's so many ways that you can offer your assistance to the family that don't have to do with religion. So just steer away from the religious kind of condolences, and anything that's heartfelt will be wise or appropriate for the moment. This is from, I think this was a blog that I found this at. I know I've only been conscious for 38 something years. This is not me. I'm much older than 38. Out of the 14 or so billion years the universe has been in existence, everything from plankton to dinosaurs and the formation of the UN and the moon landing happened before I was self-aware. And I don't miss those things, nor do I recall that huge chunk of time as horribly upsetting. I can't recall it at all because I wasn't in existence yet. Not knowing anything else, I work on the assumption that after death, we go back to that same pre-birth place. I don't feel like that would bother me any more than the other 13.8 billion years that I missed out on. This is actually just a comforting, peaceful idea when you give it some thought, especially because it makes me value this little sliver of time that I have as a conscious living being for a few decades. And it means a lot more than if I were just to transit through to some other place. And so it also helps me not take my life or that of others for granted. So this is a perspective of an atheist on the death experience and what it will be like. And I'll end with, I'm sure you're all familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. You know, she wrote on death and dying and so many other books. She really had a ton to do with hospice, and, you know, I'm sure you're very familiar with her. But she basically has this idea that what we do with this time is what makes it worth it here. And the 5 stages and all of that, they're all ways that you can, without religion, try to understand how to get through the death experience. And that's it. So do you have any questions or comments?
I just want to thank you for this, because it's like, as you said, so often in families, you adopt the religion of your family.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we have these, I tend to think about, the person who is going through this transition into death,
Mm-hmm.
as well as the family. But this is the first time we've talked, and I've just thought about, they may not all be having that same experience. You could have atheist children dealing with a very religious parent, or vice versa.
Right.
And I think this is very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, especially because there's that time differential. The older you are, the more you believe in religion, and fewer young people believe in religion. So right, there is a dichotomy.
I have an interesting situation where the husband is very religious and became so long after they were married and together, and she is not. And she is very clear that, nope, I'm not doing this. And he wants her to accept so they can be in eternity forever. And it's been a fine dance to
Mhm.
play with both of them and
Yeah.
make sure I'm meeting both of their needs, but not crossing any boundaries.
Yeah, that's a really difficult situation because with each person having their belief and respecting the other person's belief, that's one story. But when one of them wants you to change beliefs, that makes it very difficult.
Yep.
Yeah.
And she's just like, never gonna happen. She's very clear.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know what I would suggest in that, but you know, having the husband try to respect her wishes, and you know, if he's right, then and she's been a good person, they'll probably be together anyway.
Yep. Yeah.
Other questions or comments? All right. Well, it's been awesome. Thanks for having me.
so much.
Appreciate it.